Yo guys, welcome back to another video. Today, as you guys can see by the title, I'm going to be talking about Grant Morrison's new X-Men. I recently read it, and I'm here to give my thoughts, as it's one of my first experiences with X-Men, through the comics, of course. I've had plenty of experience with X-Men in general through the movies, the Fox movies growing up. I've seen bits and pieces of the cartoon. I've seen not new X-Men, but the X-Men 97 over the summer. I watched it. So there is a lot of things I don't know, but I'm familiar with the characters and the general plot of most X-Men stories, and I have been my entire life, pretty much. Anywho, today, I'm kind of going to be reviewing that, but also sort of comparing it to my first X-Men comic I ever read, which was the second Genesis by Claremont, Cockrum, and John Byrne. I read this over in the fall, and I had picked it up over the summer, and I didn't have the greatest experience with it, which is part of the reason why I never really reviewed it or talked much about it. But given that I had a far more positive experience with New X-Men, I figured I would kind of compare the two. So anyways, let's get into it, y'all. So starting off, New X-Men, I really did enjoy. I read it from this omnibus I have. I got this for Christmas from my mother. She ordered this for me, asked what I want for Christmas, and told her this was it. And yeah, I didn't end up getting it until sometime in January, just because we live in Hawaii and things take forever to get over here. But I read it through the month of February. I don't remember exactly when I started it, but yeah, I read it front to back, and I'm here to tell you guys my thoughts. One of the things I really liked about it is the suits. I mean, the suits are awesome in this story. They don't have like the hyper stylized suits that the X-Men are known for from the 70s, and have sort of become synonymous with their characters. They have much more modern take on their uniforms, which was one of the big inspirations on the X-Men movies that I grew up with. So coming to this, I was hoping there would be a sense of familiarity in that sense, and there definitely was. I really enjoyed it. I will say, in the earlier issues when Frank Quietly is on the interiors, I'm not the biggest fan of his art. I mean, to me, Frank Quietly is very similar to Frank Miller, another artist who, kind of take it or leave it, I don't really care for his art. I appreciate it. I appreciate what they've done in comics, but it's kind of buns, I'm gonna be real. And whenever they did switch over, I forget who does the art. I know there's a lot of artists on this book, but whenever Frank Quietly gets off the book is honestly where it excels. Just not a fan of his style, but sometimes in certain situations and some of the more comedic moments, his art does lend to it, and it can be kind of funny. But his style is definitely very rough around the edges, and like I said, reminds me a lot of Frank Miller. I believe the most glaring issue that I did have with New X-Men is in Grant Morrison's writing. I enjoyed it overall, but there were a lot of moments where Grant Morrison, maybe, and this could very well just be a me thing, because maybe I'm dumb, I don't know. When it comes to reading some things sometimes, especially in comics, I feel like I have a hard time grasping what's going on, and I feel like Grant Morrison is the way he writes things is almost philosophical in a way, and especially with the X-Men kind of story, I mean, that makes sense. But some of the plot points and like the dialogue just didn't connect with me, and I wasn't really understanding what was going on. Like, it was going in, but it wasn't really processing, so it would take a long time for me to actually understand what's going on. Again, that could very well just be a me thing, but I feel like there's comics where I don't have that issue, so it is just me. It's Grant Morrison's writing, like, just how I connect with it. It's the how I personally connect with this specific style of writing. It just didn't always land for me. And I thought that there were several points in the story that were just needlessly confusing for no reason. And especially the ending was just completely unneeded, I think. The ending was kind of bad. I'm going to be real. The whole thing where it jumps in the future, like, yeah, I mean, it's a cool concept, but there's not much explained. There's like a few characters that we're supposed to care about at the end there, and they're kind of just shoehorned into the story, and I couldn't care less about them. I'm gonna be real. Yeah, stuff like that. I just didn't really understand, and when the story started, I didn't really know a whole lot of what's going on. Granted, I haven't read a whole lot of X-Men. I tried reading the second Genesis, and I got like halfway through it. And that's the only experience I've had reading X-Men. So it could also be that I was missing context, and I needed to like pick that up along the way, which that could also very well play a part in my enjoyment of it. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes there were several moments where Grant Morrison's writing just didn't click with me. But overall, though, the story was really great. And I do want to key in on one specific section of the story that was my favorite, and that was when Logan and Phantom X and Cyclops, they go on their whole little mission, and then end up in space and all that. That was my favorite part of the story. Cyclops is not a favorite character of mine whatsoever. I generally dislike Cyclops, and I've had people tell me that, oh, you don't like Cyclops just because you grew up on the Fox movies and those portrayed Cyclops really poorly, which, I mean, might be true, but from everything that I've read of X-Men, like, since then, and like what I've seen in the X-Men show, yes, Cyclops is cool, but he's still a dick. Like, I think that, you know, maybe it was turned up a notch in the movies, but not by much. Cyclops, regardless, is just always a doucher, and I almost never like Scott as a character. There are specific moments where he's, you know, kind of a good character, but I rarely like him in any situation. And that, again, doesn't speak to how cool he is, because his abilities are super cool, his suit is pretty cool, but I just don't like him as a character. However, this little arc of his definitely shows some of his humanity, and I just really enjoyed seeing his personal, like, internal struggles with, you know, I'm not really familiar with what actually happened to him. It's referenced quite a lot, but it seems like he was possessed or whatever. I never read that arc of X-Men. Not familiar, but I get the gist. And then see, like, how Emma Frost plays into everything in his relationship, his marriage with Jean, and it just never really seeming the same anymore. I thought that whole, like, internal struggle with the love triangle thing going on was actually one of the best aspects of this run. I really enjoyed reading that. But anyway, circling back, that arc in particular where he's with Logan and all that, and he leaves the X-Men and Logan kind of brings him along. There's a specific line in that arc where he's talking to Phantom X about Logan, about how, you know, he's not the weapon of the U.S. government. He's not a, you know, Phantom X's weapon. He's not a weapon for Charles Xavier. He is his own man. And just him sort of, you know, as much as Logan and Cyclops butt heads and all that, it was a really nice moment seeing Cyclops sort of stand up for Logan in that way. It was just a small piece of dialogue, but, you know, despite all of the internal struggles that he's been going through for the whole story up to that point, and especially early in that arc, it was just nice to see. And from that point on, I definitely started to warm up towards Cyclops a little bit. He wasn't as much of a doucher. Which, speaking of characters that I never really like, Emma Frost, don't care for Emma Frost. However, about halfway through this run is when I start to really enjoy her character. Starting out, I don't like her, and I didn't like her before that. She's just always just a bitch. I don't care for her whatsoever. But then there came a point where her bitchiness was just so over the top that it was actually comical. And I don't know. I think she's kind of I don't know if it's intentional or not, but for me, Emma Frost is almost a comedic relief character in how she reacts to things. You know, she is a character, she has some complexities to her, I understand that. But yeah, her attitude about everything just, I think, is pretty freaking hilarious. So by the end of New X-Men, Emma Frost was actually a character that I kind of liked, having no care in the world about her whatsoever before that. A couple of the other characters that I really enjoyed were Zorn. Zorn, when he was like his own character. Of course, by the end, there's some reveals about Zorn that lead into the final arc and everything happening in the background this entire time. But back when Zorn was just like his own character, I really enjoyed him. I almost wish Zorn would come back as like a separate entity, trying to avoid a little bit of spoilers, but if you know, you know what I'm talking about. But like if Zorn was his own mutant, that would be super sick, because you know, the reveal about him was pretty cool. I mean, I enjoyed it. You know, I was like, my jaw dropped, I won't lie. It was a pretty sick reveal. But Zorn, when he was Zorn, was one of my favorite mutants. I thought that his backstory was pretty cool. His power was super cool. Yeah. But when they do reveal how his power worked and like how it actually works, it was kind of even cooler, I won't lie. But I would have liked to see Zorn be his own character. Like, I don't know how they would ever do that, but I just really enjoyed him. Also, Phantom X. I believe Phantom X was created in New X-Men. Like, that was his first appearance. Yeah, I really enjoy Phantom X. He's a lot like Deadpool to me, and that's why like his relationship with Wolverine was almost a Deadpool Wolverine kind of vibe. But yeah, he's really cool. He's very complex and confusing, and I'm not entirely sure how his powers even work with the Ava thing. I still have really no clue how it works. I just kind of, like, I spent too long trying to think about how it works, and I just kind of confused myself, and then I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna roll with it. You know, I'm just gonna keep going, not really think about it. It just is what it is. But yeah, I really enjoyed Phantom X. I think he's a super cool character, which is why I'm really interested to read Rick Remender's Uncanny X-Force. That's one that I want to get the omnibus for at some point and read, just because it has some of my favorite mutants in it. It's got Deadpool, Wolverine, Phantom X, and I believe Psylocke, which I've been reading the new Psylocke run that's ongoing right now, and I've enjoyed that too. So it's just all of my favorite mutants on like one team, and it's pretty cool. So I definitely want to check that out at some point. And now that I have the context of who Phantom X is, I'm sure it would be all the more enjoyable. And then, of course, I feel like I can't talk about New X-Men without talking about that final conflict, that final battle. Yeah, so if you haven't read it, then, you know, I all of my reviews are always considered spoiler reviews, because I just talk about whatever I want to talk about. But from this point on, it's definitely a spoiler review. Magneto, right? The reveal happens. I thought that was super cool. But one of the things that I like about Magneto, and is kind of confusing about his character, is his whole thing about how he's hell-bent on exterminating humanity. And Beak mentions this, the character Beak mentions this later on, and says that, you know, Magneto is low-key kind of like Hitler, in the way that he's trying to, you know, exterminate humanity, and his ideology is very Nazi-like. It's almost like, you know, fascist Germany. But it's even more interesting when you look at Magneto's character and his backstory. I don't know if it's necessarily accurate to the comics. I have to look into it, but I know at least in the movies, which isn't a great way to look at things, but that's how I'm familiar with most of these characters, is he was like a Jew during Nazi Germany, and they like, the Nazis took his parents away and like put them in concentration camps, and like Nazi scientists were testing on him pretty much. So he's had run-ins with Nazis, you know, all the way back from his childhood. And, you know, you would think that his childhood trauma and his burning hatred for Nazis would stray him off that path of becoming like that. He would want to do everything in his power to not become that. But in a sense, he is becoming a Nazi himself, except like a mutant Nazi. I think it's interesting because even when Beak brings that up, it's like almost like Magneto doesn't want to hear that, and, you know, he's trying to convince himself that he's not, which is why I think Magneto is an excellent villain, because in moments like that, you realize that he really is just insane, you know, like there is something mentally wrong with him, which makes him an even more compelling villain to me. He's not just almost an anti-hero who's willing to take drastic measures to, you know, achieve his goals. He's not exactly a Thanos in the sense that he, you know, believes what he's doing is right, but he's not in the right mind, because if you look at him and contrast him with like the Nazis and stuff, and he's just trying to ignore that part, you can see like the, I don't know, I guess the mental illness in Magneto, and that he's kind of insane. So I don't know, I read that, and that's kind of how I interpreted it, and I really enjoyed that. But anyways, guys, that's going to about do it for my review. I just kind of want to talk about the things I liked, didn't like, not go super in-depth. But yeah, overall, I think New X-Men is really good. And then I'm going to jump ship right here, and let's talk about Second Genesis and give you guys some context. I hated the Second Genesis. I'm going to be real. It was so boring. It was an absolute snooze fest. I don't know what exactly, this is issue 105, and when does it start? 94? With Giant Size X-Men 91 and then X-Men 94. So I read like 10 issues, and I had to like make myself read. It was just incredibly boring. I pretty much hate Claremont's writing, and that's why I'm not looking forward to most of the Claremont run. I have a couple of the Epic collections. I still plan on someday going back and reading the Phoenix Saga and all of that, just because it's iconic. But this did not give me faith in X-Men or any hope, really. I thought it was incredibly bad, and a lot of people might disagree. I understand. You know, I'm appreciative of what Claremont did for comics in general, and what, you know, I understand that he basically revolutionized the genre, right? The medium even. But I just don't think it holds up at all, really, for modern storytelling. Especially, you know, my first big comic I ever read was Invincible, which is, I feel like, sort of ruined the comics for me just because of how fantastic it is. And Kirkman's writing in Invincible is almost the polar opposite of Claremont's. There's so many panels in Invincible where nothing happens at all. Like the characters are just doing, and Kirkman will allow Invincible or whatever character is on the panel to tell the story through their actions, and there will be some dialogue, right? But I think that Invincible is so much more show don't tell in a lot of ways, and the dialogue is so much more compelling, where if you look at Claremont's X-Men, there's always text on the page. There's just so much dialogue, and it's not even just the dialogue that's annoying sometimes. It's the constant injecture from the narrator. Like, why is there a narrator telling me what's going on when I can just look and see what's happening? Like, why not let the characters tell the story, not only through their dialogue, but through their actions? Why do I need a narrator to describe what's happening and telling me what to think? I just hate that aspect of this first 10 issues of Claremont's X-Men run that I read and had to power through. So I dropped it. I'm probably not going to read much of the Claremont run because of that. There's some other stuff that I'll check out from him, like here and there, but I just can't do it. I can't do it. That's why I was very much hoping that new X-Men would come in clutch for me. Just very much more modern and refreshing take. Cut out a lot of that unnecessary bullshit that Claremont did that I absolutely despise, and give me a more streamlined X-Men story. And that's what Grant Morrison managed to do. And yes, I did have some issues here and there with it, but by and large, it was so incredibly much better than Claremont's X-Men, from what I've read. I never really felt like I had to push myself to read, because the story just came naturally and it was enjoyable almost all the way through. There were a few parts where I was like, but for the majority of it, it was enjoyable. And, so that sort of revitalized my faith in X-Men. And I do want to consume more X-Men stories. But yeah, this, almost ruined reading comics for me just because it was terrible. That's about it for today's video. Again, just wanted to do my little review of that and talk about Claremont's X-Men a little bit, and, why I gave up on that and jumped ship. Just my thoughts. I do plan on reading Astonishing X-Men soon. I have the first Epic Collection for that. The second Epic Collection comes out next month. But I believe you're supposed to read House of M in between the two Epic Collections, and I don't have that one yet either. So I'm going to hold off on continuing my X-Men journey for now, and I'll read those some other time. But yeah, just to give you guys an idea, I am continuing through the X-Men timeline with my own sort of reading list that I've put together with the help of some friends and some other content creators on YouTube. I've put together, I think, a X-Men reading list that works for me. But anyways, thank you all for watching. I hope you guys did enjoy. All my links will be in the description if you want to check more out. The Discord is always there. You guys should join. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.